Today on the Region Free Gamers podcast, how to put 65 million years of gameplay into 20 hours.
Welcome back, everybody, to the Region Free Gamers podcast, the podcast fluent in gaming. My name is Arnie. I'm back in the driver's seat today. Feels like it's been a while since
it hasn't. Not that long
since I've gotten a chance to do. I know, but it feels like forever compared to to them.
It's because you're always
like
dying
weeks.
to chat.
Yeah, to me, it's been like 3 months. But today we're going to be exploring time and space, shifting through dimensions, and unlocking so many endings. We're talking about Chrono Trigger, everybody. We're just going to make a quick pit stop to thank all of our fans for their continued support, always listening, always reviewing, always chatting. Love you guys so much. And an extra special thank you, which is what you get when you give me money, to our Patreon supporters, some of who are listening to this episode right now. If you want to be in on that, patreon.com/regionfreegamers. If you can't afford to give us money or you just don't love us enough yet, at least leave us a review and, work your way through the tiered system of earning my love and affection, which is the whole goal of this entire endeavor. But this episode is special for a number of reasons. A lot of big things happening in this episode. Number one, this is episode 101, probably, past 100. Which means that we can finally stop trying as hard. Up to now, we've been really giving it 110%, but we cleared the milestone. It's all downhill from here, folks. Number two, we have a very special announcement. We have a brand new full-time host of the Region Free Gamers podcast that I'm going to introduce now. You've heard her before on some of our previous episodes. Kelly, also known as Sierranight. How are you doing, Kelly?
Hi, guys. It is very great. I'm so happy to be here. So, very excited to do this with y'all.
Yeah, nice to have you. And I'm going to introduce our second host who's also joining us, Paul. How you doing, Paul?
Nobody cares about me. I'm old news.
It's not as exciting to hear about you. We hear about you like every episode. So before we get started, I just realized we didn't complete the onboarding process, Kelly. So I'd like to do that live for our fans now. I believe that I sent you your ceremonial robes and your silver chalice. I'm gonna go get our statue of Baphomet that we do to complete the ritual. But no, it's so nice to have you on. I'm glad that you gave us the opportunity to actually join us as a full-time host for this, because I loved having you on both times that you were on before. And it's funny, the first time you were on, we talked Persona 4, which is a giant JRPG. And so now we've switched it up by talking about Chrono Trigger, which is another giant JRPG. So I'm glad that we are able to keep things in your wheelhouse. But for some of our fans who may not have heard you on your first couple of appearances on the show, can you tell us like a little bit about yourself as far as how you got into gaming and where you're at right now as a gamer or collector or whatever you self-identify as in this community?
Right. Well, basically, I've been gaming my pretty much entire life. I can remember being, super young, and my father put a Atari 5200 controller in my hands. So we played Pac-Man and, Mario Brothers. Not nice. Super Mario Brothers, but Mario Brothers together. Yeah. And then it just kind of snowballed from there. I never stopped loving gaming. As the years went by, got into RPGs mostly, so Final Fantasy Adventure being the first one, and then from there, all the Super Nintendo RPGs, and just my love for RPGs has never gone away. And of course, what a lot of people know me for right now, too, is the PlayStation Vita.
That's right.
Fell in love with the system when it came out and became a huge collector of the PS Vita. I have over 300 games. I finally cataloged them the other week. So over 300 games on the PlayStation Vita. And it'll probably continue to grow as I find those niche titles I'm still looking for.
Yeah, proud member of Vita Island. That's where I remember you using that hashtag, and I was like,
Yes.
oh, this is interesting. It led me to a whole rabbit hole of people who passionately collect for the PlayStation Vita, a game system that I violently ignored throughout its lifespan until very recently.
Dude, me
so
too,
did
man.
Sony, so
The thing is, though, when I actually picked up the Vita, I think it was like 3-4 years ago or something like that. That system is fantastic, man. Like, I remember holding it and looking at that sweet, sweet screen and being like, I understand why this system was, relatively unsuccessful, but at the same time, man, what a quality piece of hardware. I was just enamored with it, and I couldn't believe I hadn't actually really kind of taken the leap and explored it before. I'm glad I did. It's a pleasure to play games on it, and it has some great games.
Yeah. It's funny. That was sort of my journey with it as well. I had heard about it. I heard people talking about it. I knew that it cost an arm and a leg, and I knew that it had these proprietary memory cards that were extremely expensive. So I was just like,
what a bad move by them.
3DS
Yes.
It is for me. But as time went on, I was like, man, there's some really cool games on here, and it looks great. It does emulation incredibly well. If you're into that sort of stuff, it's like a very good machine for that. But it seemed like just as I was starting to turn around to be like, oh, this looks cool, Sony's like, we're not talking about that anymore.
I just don't get it. I mean, I do, but I don't.
Yeah, so I do want to ask you, Kelly, just on this, while we're on this train for a hot minute, what is it for you specifically? Because me and Paul sort of came to it late, but I feel like you sort of were an early adopter of the system. Is that right?
yes, very much so.
So was there anything in particular about the Vita that drew you to it? And then once you were in it, like, is there anything about it that sort of kept you going, collecting, and playing on it for so long?
Well, I got into it. Basically, I got to test it before it officially released because I worked in a video game store at the time.
Okay.
So I got to play it before it even came out. Little Deviants was the game that they put on to just basically show off the different features. And while I didn't really care for the game, just the rear touch screen and the screen itself really drew me in. And then I found out Persona 4 was getting a re-release on the system, so that was a big factor towards me buying the system. Gravity Rush being on there. There were just a lot of games, the Uncharted game as well. Yeah. Just those ones made me say, okay, let's grab the system and see where it goes from there. Honestly, the fact that the games themselves don't take up that much room on a shelf, you can put a lot of them on the shelf because it's such a small factor. Yeah. That's a nice thing too. So it still, even with the number of games I have, they don't take up that much room.
Yeah, and they display extremely well.
Yes.
One of the nicer looking game boxes when you get them all lined up, and they display very nicely, especially now when if you have like a few collector's editions and stuff like that, they always look great.
Yes.
When you're just looking at them. Much better, in my opinion, than 3DS games, which are just like a blinding white light of like video game in your face. It's I want to say I want to say that most of the times my favorite part of an episode is the opening like salvos we have, like our tangents that we always seem to get involved in. But this particular episode, I'm actually really excited to just sort of dive right in because we have so much to talk about, Paul. I have so many questions. Specifically for you and Kelly, because I feel like you guys have more of a history with this series than I do. So I want to get a lot of your perspectives on this. So do you mind if I just jump us right into Chrono Trigger? I'm going to ask for your consent on this because I know this is very important to you that we have a nice rapport at the beginning of the show.
It is, and I do have one question. When you
go ahead.
So and because Kelly's on, this is actually pretty apt. So when you mentioned indoctrinating her into our cult, and you mentioned Baphomet. So these demons that pop up every once in a while, like in pop culture or whatever, Baphomet, Mott, etc., etc. Yes. Am I the only one who every single time I see one of these demon names, I think of Persona? Like literally
No,
every time.
That's all my mythological knowledge comes from Persona.
For real, right? Yeah. Kelly, you?
Oh yeah, definitely.
It's honestly the one thing outside of tarot cards. It's probably the one thing it's taught me the most about.
Yeah.
And now I guess with Persona 5, like a deeper appreciation of coffee, maybe.
Maybe, and curry. Yeah.
Yeah, but I don't know. It's interesting because the first time I played that game, I was just like, I knew some of them because as you get higher in level, they become like increasingly more obvious. But at the beginning, when you're talking about these monsters, I'm like, wow, these guys are really creative. They like made up all these things and like, this is like hundreds of things. And then you get to like the end game and it's like, oh, would you like to summon Thor? And I was like, I see.
Oh.
Yeah.
I get it now.
Here's Satan.
Yeah, the giant penis on the chariot.
Mara.
That one went right over my head.
Every time I see Mara, it's like it's like the first time. I'm playing Persona Q2 right now, and I'm pretty deep into the game. And so I beat a rare monster. I got a Persona, and there it is, Mara the penis. And I was like, oh yeah, I remember you.
It's amazing to me that even though it is a meme, like a fairly well-known meme amongst people who play this game, that I don't think Nintendo has once like raised objection about this. I don't think it's ever been censored as far as I know.
Too deep in the game, dude. They don't play that far.
I was gonna say you gotta put it all in the end game. You gotta backload all the like controversial content.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it may have been edited out of the first Persona. But
okay. Which makes sense.
The original on the PlayStation, you mean?
Yes.
Yeah.
Ah.
Yeah. Early in the life of the franchise, I would understand that. But now that it's actually no, you know what? That's actually completely ass backwards. Back when it was like unknown, they were like, let's not risk it. This is probably not appropriate. Now that it's like a worldwide phenomenon, it's like every game. The only monster that's going to be in every single one of these.
Tossing out penises like candy.
Oh my god. All right. But now.
Not where I intended that to go, Arnie. I swear to God. I swear. I was just curious.
You just wanted to talk about penis monsters. It's okay.
So Chrono Trigger. This is a big one. I'm actually very happy we're doing this. I think this has been one for me personally that I've been curious about doing. So I'm glad that Kelly was willing to jump on this topic specifically. I don't think it's necessarily, I don't know, maybe it is one you want to do for your first time in because it's like so well known, you probably have a lot of like playtime with it. But yes, it's a big one. So I expect at least one person to yell at me about how I mispronounce like every character's name.
It's Chrono Trigger, Arnie. Chrono Trigger.
This is also a small tangent, but I just want to know if you guys experience this. Whenever I play a JRPG, especially ones that have like, in like fantasy settings with like crazy names and stuff like that, I always come up with my personal pronunciation. And then I feel like whenever I find someone that's like, oh, I've played that, and I want to talk to them about it, I'm like, I have to wait until you say their name so that you can't correct me. I can correct you. Because I feel like we're not going to have the same pronunciation for these. And we had this problem in our Phantasy Star episode.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering how many times it's going to crop up in this episode. So I'm going to try my hardest to get these correct.
Honestly, like I was doing some research for this, and it seems like even online, there's multiple ways people are saying these names. Okay. So I don't think you can do any wrong here.
Oh, good.
I don't think so either.
So you guys have to respect my truth. I can say it how I want, and you just have to be okay with that.
I do have to say though, that Phantasy Star episode, the fact that Mike, I don't remember if it happened on the episode or if it was when we were chatting before, but Mike was like, he called Meow Mayu, and I'm like, Mayu? What's wrong with you, dude? It's Meow. And he's like, oh my god, you're right, it's a cat. Of course it's named Meow. It's been like 30 years that he's calling it Mayu.
Just ruining people's lives, Paul. Alright, so now we're actually going to get into it. Chrono Trigger. Originally released on the Super Nintendo and Super Famicom. Japan got it in March of 1995. We got it August of 1995. By we, I mean North America. The European Union and Australia, sad face. Never got it.
Criminal. Absolutely criminal.
I'm sure Jeff somehow owned the Super Famicom version that he still keeps pristine in the box or something.
Yes.
But most people did not play it. Developed and published by Squaresoft. And this is where we're going to get into probably my favorite part of the entire development of Chrono Trigger, is that the development of this game is known, I would say, for 3 specific members. The entire development team, I think, is known as the Dream Team. But there's 3 guys that everybody always talks about. And that is Hironobu Sakaguchi, who created something called Final Fantasy. I'm sure he did well with that, but this is much more important.
Small potatoes.
Written by Yuji Horii, who created a little-known series called Dragon Quest / Dragon Warrior, if anybody remembers that. And the art was done by Akira Toriyama, who also worked on Dragon Quest, but worked on Dragon Ball Z. Some anime that people may or may not have watched as children and informed their worldview.
Sounds obscure.
Yeah,
Yeah, I'm gonna have to look these titles up.
I like to refer to these people this is a big 3 in the video game industry if I've ever seen one, Paul. This is MJ, Pippen, Rodman. This is LeBron, Wade, Bosch. This is Clay, Steph, KD. This is top tier. You're not getting this for your run of the mill developed game, right?
No.
These forces had to be brought together to bear witness to an experience for the ages.
It really was. And especially at that time, we talk about them now, and even now, these are all fairly prominent names, right? Toriyama hasn't really gone away. Sakaguchi hasn't really gone away. They're all kind of, diminished in their way, but they're still names. But back then, dude, are you kidding me? I think at the time, even, especially Toriyama, he had just finished Dragon Ball, the manga, and people were like, so what are you going to do now? And then Chrono Trigger comes along, right? It was a pretty big deal for people. Yeah.
I think if these 3 guys got together today to do something, people would lose their mind, let alone at the height of their powers.
Yeah, no, I agree. Well, I mean, if it happened today, it would be, I wonder if it would be more of a curiosity, because, look, I mean, I'm not gonna kid myself. By the time I'm 60 or 65 years old, I'm not gonna be in touch with what people 40 years younger than me want. I'm gonna be almost willfully ignorant, actually. It just, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So if it happened now, I don't know if they would quite have their finger on the pulse of the industry like they did when they were at the peak of their powers. It would still be a big deal, though. Don't get me wrong.
Yeah, no, for sure. And so you would think that core would be damn, we did it. We nailed it. Nothing left to do. But they didn't leave well enough alone, Paul. The person who wrote the majority of the story for Chrono Trigger is this individual known as Masato Kato. The story of Chrono Trigger was based on a draft, apparently, that Yuji Horii had written, and he sort of fleshed out into the game that we know and love today. So Kato worked for Tecmo originally. So he worked on Captain Tsubasa, which I know Paul is somewhat of a fan of.
I have all day for Captain Tsubasa.
And the OG Ninja Gaiden. So he's probably responsible for more physical damage to players' homes than most other creators in their time. And then, of course, he moved to Square to work on Chrono, Xenogears. He worked on Final Fantasy VII and Final Fantasy XI. The dude's resume is up there now, he's no slouch. And then the soundtrack was composed primarily by Yasunori Matsuda. His works, his works page on Wikipedia is so long that I just have to read Xenogears, Xenosaga, Xenoblade, Shadow Hearts, Izanuma 11, Front Mission, Bomberman, Mario Party, Secret of Mana, Final Fantasy V, classics, just up and down the board. The man don't miss. I'm sure some of his more obscure games maybe aren't as good, but at that point, who cares, right? It's just you've won. And so the thing about Mitsuda is his work on Chrono Trigger was very early in his career. He hadn't really done anything of note that I'm aware of except working on some other big titles. But this was his like first shot at a main sort of composer credit.
Unless I'm mistaken, he was a sound engineer. Like he was working on sound effects and so on and so forth.
Yes,
Right.
and he wanted to sort of move up within Square. And that's where I found this story that I'd like to share with you. But it says, in 1994, realizing that he would never get a chance to move up to a real composition duty without some drastic action, and feeling concerned about his low pay, he gave Square's vice president, Hironobu Sakaguchi, an ultimatum. Let him compose or he would quit. Sakaguchi assigned the young musician to the team working on Chrono Trigger, telling him that, after you finish it, maybe your salary will go up. Mitsuda was assigned as the sole composer for the game, in the end creating 54 tracks for the final release. Mitsuda drove himself to work hard on the score, frequently working until he passed out and would wake up with ideas for songs such as the ending theme from the game. Yep. So like the absolute gumption as a, sound engineer at the time to walk up to the vice president of your company and be like, listen, bro, I know that you don't know who I am, but I'm kind of a big deal, so you should let me compose a game or I'm going to quit. And him just being like, yeah, whatever, just do this, and like maybe...
yeah, whatever, do this little game we're doing, whatever, maybe you'll get somewhere.
Just make sure you don't disappoint, Hori-san and Toriyama-san. I know they're not a big deal, but,
Yeah. I'm going to have to put out my cigarette on your hand now for disrespecting me like that. Unfortunately, Mitsuda worked himself so hard that he gave himself stomach ulcers and had to be hospitalized partway through the development of Chrono Trigger. So, the good and the bad here, right? Like you're seeing both ends.
Incredible, but like he did. What's funny is back then, I don't know if they still do it now. Probably not. Like the size of the teams, things are a little bit probably less intimate than they used to be. But like back then, Square used to have. Once the game was done, they'd have kind of like a rap party. And at the rap parties, they would actually watch the ending to the game that they were working on, like as a group, right?
Yeah.
And Mitsuda got out of the hospital just so he could go to the rap party and watch the endings to the game. And pretty touching stuff. He cried, during the endings. And then Sakaguchi like backhanded him like Don Corleone. And said, "You can act like a man." I made up the last part, but the rest is true. It's good stuff.
You
did
say
they do
he was
all
crying.
The
Would you?
I said, did they do all the endings? Because that's like a movie worth of endings.
Evidently they did, because it's
everybody
like an
was
hour
getting
and a half
up, and
worth of endings.
And Sakaguchi was like, "No, sit down. We have 13 more endings that we have."
It's
to
like
get
Return
to.
of the King.
See, here's the thing. In that interview, he's like, yes, I went and I was crying when I saw the ending. And I was like, I think it was less the ending and more the like internal bleeding that he was suffering at the time. As he was like stitching his stomach back together. It's like, have to attend rap party.
It's probably still like worth it. Whatever.
Yeah, 100%. And then Sakaguchi turned to him, put his arm over his shoulder and was like, we're going to get you that $2 raise.
50 cents.
Good job, kid.
You earned it.
Kicked him back into the mines to develop another soundtrack.
Here's a ham.
So you would think, who would they possibly get after giving this entire project to a little-known sound engineer, and having him work so hard that he put himself in the hospital? Who would they possibly burden with the remainder of this soundtrack?
Probably some intern.
Maybe Yubo fucking Uematsu, who for some reason wasn't the first choice for this, but like halfway through the game, they're like, man, we really might have something. Let's get the fucking king over here. So he sort of came in and finished it, much like best sixth man of all time, James Harden, came straight off the bench to deliver a fiery dunk and finish off this soundtrack. You're like, I got more of these. They're riddled throughout the whole thing.
Oh yeah.
Can we really call James Harden the best sixth man? I would have gone with Ginobili myself.
Oh, fair enough. That's a good point. But come on, man. He went from coming off the bench to being MVP.
I'm not gonna argue with you on this. We could go. This could go off the rails very fast.
Yeah. So Uematsu. I mean, we've talked about him before. I would say at length. And if you don't know him, he's the guy who did the soundtrack for 3D World Runner. So that'll probably
that's his best known work for sure.
Jog your memory on that one. Yeah. I was looking at his credits because I was just like, I mean, I know it's all Final Fantasy and stuff, but what did he do before? And I saw 3D World Runner. I was like, hell
that's
yeah.
The one.
That's the one.
Hell yeah.
The birth of a legend.
So obviously I think that it's, I think it seems pretty obvious now that this is a good team. I would call this one of the best teams ever assembled to develop a JRPG or really any video game. But you got to ask yourself, once you put the pieces together, are they gonna meld? Because all these guys individually, great, but when we've seen time and time again in like many spheres, getting a lot of like really well-known, potentially big-egoed people together in a room to try to work together on one thing, not always the best idea. How did it turn out? Well, we're gonna talk about it. But before that, I want to ask you guys, because this is something that's like my curiosity. I wasn't around for Chrono Trigger's release. I was 4 when it came out, so I wasn't deep into JRPGs yet. I was dipping my toe, but Mystic Quest was like my speed back then, not Chrono Trigger. So, do you think that we will ever see a team like this again? And I know that development teams are much bigger now, so like there's less of a focus on like specific members of a team unless you're like an auteur or like the creator, like you're a David Cage type of video game developer. But is this something that we might see a collaboration of this magnitude again? Kelly, what do you think?
I think no, we will not.
No.
Sounded like these three were the main three were friends beforehand. They talked about it, and it was a huge passion project for them. So getting them together, I think because it was a passion project, they were able to put their egos aside a little bit and work together. Nowadays, with the video game industry being larger, there's so many games coming out at all times. I just can't see that much talent put on one game.
I can't either. I don't think I see it happening, dude. I just don't. Like, that was a very specific time. Like, Hori was basically a contractor. I don't think he was an Enix employee, and unless I'm mistaken, this was before the merger. This was just Squaresoft.
Yes, it was.
So Hori was able to do what he wanted. Toriyama had his own production studio, so he could do what he wanted. So when you have two big names like that who can effectively just kind of do whatever they want, I don't know that happens too often today. And even the names today, like, the teams are just so large. You know what I mean? Like, one person I don't think has quite the same effect, unless it's an indie game, right? Then with indie games, you're starting to get more into the auteurship, so to speak. But that particular group where they're at the top of their industry and they have that kind of influence, I don't see that happening again. Like Kelly said, that was a very specific situation. They just kind of met up in the USA for a conference, and literally they were like, having beers or whatever, or sake, I don't know. And they're like, you know what, we should work on something together. And then it took a few years, but they got there.
Yeah, they were like, lol, you want to make the greatest game of all time? And they were like, sure, why not? I got an afternoon to kill.
But it did. It took quite a while, the development. Yeah. Like, it was, back then games took, I don't know, like even an RPG didn't generally take more than a year to develop. But this one, Chrono Trigger, took about 2.5 years. And the beginning of it was mostly just like them kind of getting together and planning it out. That was unheard of. Yeah.
So, at the time, was Chrono Trigger as hyped back then as it is now? Like, because I know, like, now we're spoiled for choice. We know about everything that's happening in the video game industry the second that it happens, pretty much, even things they don't want us to know. But back then, I feel like people were much more reliant on news coverage, magazine coverage, maybe some websites that would cover some of this stuff in a more scaled back version than what we're seeing now. Like, was Chrono Trigger a game that was really expected? Like, were you guys waiting for it, or was it something that you kind of stumbled upon when you were in the game store one day and you were like, oh, this is cool, this seems dope, like, let me play this? What about you, Paul? What was your experience?
Man, my experience, if I could go back in time and just take like a sack of oranges, not doorknobs, that's a little bit too much, but if I could take a sack of oranges,
swipe the shelves clean.
No, if I could just go to town on myself, right? Like as a kid, because like what happened was this game's released in 1995, right? Mm-hmm. By 1995, I had moved on. Right, like, you know, we had seen CD sound, we had seen the 3DO, which I mean, haha, but it was still like a fairly significant leap in technology.
Yeah,
and you've got the Sega Saturn and the PlayStation released, right? Mm-hmm. So I was Sony's mark, right? Like I was the guy who was like, sprites, pff, come on, that's ridiculous, right? So when Chrono Trigger came out, it was more of almost like a curiosity, you know what I mean? Like, when I played it, I borrowed a friend's Super Nintendo and his copy of Chrono Trigger. He's like, you have to play this, it's so good. But it didn't have the effect on me that it probably should have, and that looking back on it now, I just did not appreciate it for what it is. I didn't, right? Like, I like to think I grew up having, you know, good taste in video games, and I like to think that continues today. But I fucking missed on Chrono Trigger because I played it and it was relatively short. You know, it clocks in around the 25-hour range. And at the end of it, I was like, well, you know, that was like having a gourmet hot dog and not really like a full meal. God. You know what I mean? I mean, I was like, it was good. You know, like the battle system's great. I love the ATB as I've mentioned many, many times on the show before.
Yeah.
But I was like, sprites, you know, it's good, but it's not long enough. And like, fuck, dude, like just saying these things out loud,
oh, wow.
like all these things that now I pine for, like I love great sprite art. I love shorter RPGs. Back
just
then,
for my
I was
own,
so stupid.
Just for my own curiosity, because I can't remember, but did you play Dragon Quest 7? I think it was 7.
Dragon Quest 7 is like, it takes all Dragon Quest 7, it takes all the game,
sir.
Oh my god, it takes all, and this is actually kind of where this was like the TSN turning point. The Canadians know what I'm talking about for me and RPGs, because Dragon Quest 7 is, I don't want to say it's Chrono Trigger, but it has a lot of the ideas from Chrono Trigger, like the traveling between worlds and the so on and so forth, except that it bloats it. And it is a slog. And when you compare Dragon Quest VII to Chrono Trigger, that especially is where Chrono Trigger looks really good, because it's so tight and focused and, you know, like actually fun and not this chore.
Not a slog,
Yeah. What about you, Kelly? Were you anxiously awaiting Chrono Trigger back in the day? Did you even know that it was coming? Is it something you picked up later in life?
Oh, I was anxiously awaiting for it to come out. I was a subscriber to Nintendo Power at that point in time. So Nintendo Power started hyping it up. And of course, at that point, I had already played Final Fantasy II, Final Fantasy III. And it was just, I was really wanting more RPGs on the system. So seeing one that was coming out, it really didn't matter what it was. It was an RPG and I needed it. So
at least one of us made the correct choice in 1995.
Yes. So I was saving up all of my, my money that I was getting every week, and just as soon as it came out and I saw it in the store for $84.99. And the thing is, back then I didn't there wasn't exact release dates that I could remember. It was, you would go in the store and suddenly you'd see it on the shelf. So I went in the store, saw it on the shelf, did not have enough money saved yet, ran, found my parents, and was like, can I please borrow some money so I can get this game? Got that game, and it was a 40-minute drive home. So I was sat in the back seat, tore open the game, and was reading the manual in the back seat.
Reading the manual in the back seat. Classic.
Yes.
What kid who was into video games didn't do that? Love it.
Back in 95, you could either put a down payment on like a 2-bedroom ranch or purchase Chrono Trigger.
Yep.
Those were your only options.
That's why when people are like, games are going up to $69.99, I'm like, psh, Whatever.
Yeah, I know, right?
It's fine. Whatever.
God, it's amazing how expensive these games were back then. Because this happened with Phantasy Star. Phantasy Star was like a $80 game, and that was an 8-bit game, man. And then Street Fighter 2, like they were.
Yeah.
I mean, they were just gouging for that game.
Paul, this is the problem, is that people like you who don't understand the industry always complaining about how expensive things are. All right, this was using the cutting edge technology of a battery backup save. So if that's not worth an extra $30, I don't know what is.
It's true, man. Those watch batteries, what are they made of? Platinum?
The cartridge and the board cost like 3 cents, but the battery backup cost like $57.
Yeah.
So they had to mark it up. All right, so now that we've established the development pedigree of the game, what we're going to do is we're going to take a quick break, and we're going to come back and dive right into the product of said development. So see you on the other side of the break, guys. And we're back. So now, dive right into Chrono Trigger. So Chrono Trigger, I like whenever we do one of these JRPG episodes, I always struggle as to how I want to present it, because I don't want to just sit here and recite the story, especially Chrono Trigger's story.
Yeah.
So I've sort of broken this up into a few segments. So I wanted to start off with gameplay, just because I think for me, it's what got me hooked on it right out the gate. Like, the story and the characters, like, develop over time and become, like, precious and beloved, and I want to protect all of them. But the gameplay, like, right from the beginning, really made my eyebrows go, like, oh, this is interesting. It's obviously a JRPG that was released, late into what some would consider the golden age of JRPGs. Like, the 16-bit era was the first, I think, JRPG moment, especially here in North America and the West at large. Mm-hmm. So one of the most memorable features of Chrono Trigger is the battle system, and especially in the time that it was released. So you have a 3-player party. A la, I guess, Secret of Mana, but that hadn't been released yet, had it?
I think it had, but also kind of a different game anyway.
Yeah, it is. But that's the game that I sort of like. That was the first game I remember of that era to be like only 3 characters. Like, I was like, where's my fourth?
Right.
Where's my 4th party member that I desperately need for reasons?
And it's
I don't like.
It's
odd
funny
numbers.
you mention that, because like back then, especially after having played Final Fantasy 2/4,
yeah.
Somehow in my head I equated more party members with more better.
Yeah.
Yes.
So like when Chrono Trigger came along and it was only 3, I'm like, 3 characters. Wah, wah.
Well, even Final Fantasy 3, I was like, 4?
Yeah.
No, I'm supposed to be 5. Like, what's going on here?
This is a step backwards.
I was like, can you not render another sprite on this all-powerful machine?
Could you imagine quadruple text in this game? Shit.
Oh my god.
Somehow you add 1 party member and the game's length goes from 25 hours to 150. Kato's like, oh, I got it. My typing fingers are ready. Oh my god. So basically, you have your 3 party members. You can customize them with in different ways. Much more limited, I would say, than some of the other RPGs that people were playing around this time as well. I don't think the customization was particularly deep, not that it needed to be. But then the big twist comes in, which is where the game sort of eschews traditional random battles in favor of having, the enemies on screen and for you to be able to avoid as you see fit. So you only fight when you want to fight, or when you're an idiot and you fuck up and the sprite touches you.
And when you're forced to as well.
Yes, there are a few
you can
occasions
avoid
where
it.
you are obligated to fight.
Yes, exactly.
So basically what would happen is once you engage an enemy, and this is my favorite part of it, is that it doesn't sort of shift modes to a battle screen. It just, a few more enemies pop out from the edges of the screen, and it's like, you're fighting here, where you are. So the map just becomes the battle screen itself, which I thought at the time, I mean, I've only played the DS version, spoiler alert, but I thought it was really cool and fun. I was like, oh, this is great. Like, I know what my battlefield's going to look like every single time, and it sort of comes into play with the other aspect of it, which is that enemies move around the field, and so you have to be very strategic about how you employ your moves to be able to make sure you hit your enemies. And so getting into specific areas, whenever I got into a battle, I was immediately like, okay, so like the layout of this map is perpendicular, and like I can go here, they can't move past this area. So like if I was like, I am Sun Tzu, like I am Master Commander.
The other great thing too about those battles is the amount of character and, I don't know, whimsy that they were able to inject. Because like a lot of these battles, I think they did like over 100 of these, but they have very specific starting animations. So it's not just like monster pops up or, like in your average Final Fantasy game, the screen changes and then it's like, oh, this guy again. The way the battles start, like there's often like some kind of amusing sprite-based animation.
Yeah.
And it totally went over my head back then, but like playing it now, I'm like, this is the thing that I always talk about on the show, which is it's the thing that shows they care. You know, the developers really gave a shit about this game. They poured their all into it, and it's little things like that. It just adds that extra bit of character. Really, really great stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it seemed like they the fact that the characters, you could tell that they were a team, right? Because they had different tech attacks for every character. All of them had double attacks with each other, except for Magus, but that's another story. But they worked together as a team. They had these animations where they were working together. The front of the box art is actually one of the triple techs, so you can take a look at that, and it's amazing. They just put so much care into this game, and the battle system itself just seemed like a natural progression of what should be next in that active time battle system. And I wish more games today even still used the system that was in that game. Yeah,
it was strange because Paul mentioned like, oh, I think they did like over 100 of these battles, and I guess it had never occurred in my mind like, oh yeah, there's like a set number of pre-programmed battle scenarios that can happen. Because I guess in my mind, like, because the characters move around, the baddies move around, it's like no battle ever felt the same.
Yes.
So like I know in my brain, I'm like, there has to be like these have to be scripted, and there has to be like two battles that are pretty much start the same way. But in practice, if somebody had told me that, I'd be like, no, that's not, no. All these things like are unique, and it's always like a different experience every single time.
Yeah.
And so it made it so the game, the part that I always worry about with JRPGs, not necessarily Chrono Trigger because it's on the shorter side, but it's always like once you learn the mechanics, can the game keep it fresh enough so it's not a slog, so it doesn't become stale, so I don't have to, be like, oh, okay, I'm going through the motions, just trying to get to the last boss and finish this game because I've done everything. And Chrono Trigger, I think, solves that problem twofold. One, by not forcing you to fight enemies, and two, by making you fight them in such a way that makes it seem like unique every single time. You're like, oh, he didn't move that way last time, like maybe I'll do something else. And like it's never as exciting as it sounds. Like eventually you just get texts that like take up the whole screen, and you're like, oh, whatever, it's gonna hit them. But in the beginning, it really pushes you to, before the story and the characters really get going, that's what, at least for me, kept me moving forward.
Yeah, and like even something as simple as backtracking through a dungeon. Mm-hmm. The enemy placements are different. The positioning of them is different.
Yep.
It sounds like it's not a big deal, but like this is the game where it's fun by 1,000 cuts. Because there's just so many little things that they add or take away, right? Because there's no random battles, for example. They took out so many things that were kind of JRPG convention at the time, and it really, really adds up after a while.
Yeah.
And you really didn't need to grind in this game at all. There was
not at all.
The enemy placement was perfect, so that you got just enough battles where you could get past that next boss without grinding at all.
Yep.
Yeah. The only fault I might say about it is that I found, look, it's an active time battle system, at least as far as I'm concerned, that's automatically fun, right? Yeah. And grinding is less of a grind for me personally with that system. So I found that I would often just want to fight because the fighting was fun, and it definitely made the game a bit easier, I thought, than it needed to be. But that's not, come on, man. I'm digging deep to knock the game for that, right?
Yeah.
I was young, so I was still, some of the bosses, they had mechanics where if you weren't paying attention, they could still wreck you. So if you didn't kill the left arm first or the right arm first or whatever, you would just get wrecked. So if you weren't paying attention, there were certain bosses I managed to die on quite a few times because I just couldn't get in my head how to beat the boss.
Yeah. And that's the case with, like, I don't know, almost all the battles in the game. Like, almost all the battles in the game have some kind of, like, they have some kind of quirk or some kind of puzzle to figure out or what have you. And especially so with the bosses, like you said, Kelly. If you can't, like, if there are some bosses, like, they have, specific counterattacks depending on what element you hit them with and so on, and the counterattacks just ruin you. So you have to really kind of be on point and kind of solve these puzzles as you go through, in addition to your usual, like, balance of attack and healing and stuff like that you'd ordinarily have in a JRPG.
And I just want to circle back real quick to what, Paul and Kelly have been talking about, is this active time battle system. Something that Paul loves, I'm not a huge fan of. But in Chrono Trigger, it just works. In Final Fantasy IV/2, the game that Paul loves to death, that also features this system, it didn't click with me as well as it did in Chrono Trigger. It honestly did not.
I'm a huge fan of 4 as well.
I enjoy 4, but if gun to my head, if somebody was like this or that, I'd pick Chrono Trigger. There's something about that battle system.
You on that.
I know.
There's no one's going to argue on that.
I know. I'm making you the bad guy by making you do the unpopular thing. But they called it ATB 2.0 for Chrono Trigger, and that's because of the addition of text, like Kelly had mentioned previously. And text is where I feel like whatever lack of customization I had bitched about before, this is where you get that sort of deep strategic customization in which party members you mix and match together, how you put them together, and what techs you like enjoy using or are effective for a particular fight or boss encounter or whatnot. And I fell in love with text. Like, this is one of the few games where I was actively switching out characters just to be like, I gotta see this tech. It sounds cool.
Yes.
Like, what's gonna happen, And it sadly, most of the triple techs involve Chrono. So, like, they encourage you heavily to have Chrono in your party. Yeah. But if you're a baller, you don't need to. And I don't know, some of the techs without him are cool. Like, those were the ones that I was always curious. I'm like, get this guy out of here. He's in like 90% of them. Like, I want to see the ones where it's like Robo, Magus, and like Luca or something. Like, what's this?
I almost feel bad because I'm with you. I just kind of wanted to see them all, and there are so many. Like, it's a staggering amount of staggering amount of text. But like, I have to admit, after a while, I just kind of defaulted to Chrono and Frog and the X attack, I think is what it was called, or cross cut or X cut or something.
Yep.
And I would just spam that while healing them with Marl. Like, after a while, it was just like, all right, this is all I need.
Yeah. Yeah, that's pretty OP.
But nonetheless, like, not to poop on your point there. I was actively making the game unfun. But you're right. Like, there is just a ton of variety, and it's so nice that, like, let's pull out Dragon Quest VII as an example, right? lots of characters, right? And they don't necessarily encourage you to switch between party members. What they do is, as you progress through the story, certain party members just disappear. And I know, spoiler alert, Chrono disappears for an amount of time in Chrono Trigger, but that's besides the point. Like, the fact is, in Chrono Trigger, they dangle a carrot in front of you and saying, look at all this cool shit you can do if you change characters and explore. Whereas in Dragon Quest, they're like, you must change characters. And we don't care if you have a preferred party. This is what's happening.
You don't like being scolded by your video game?
I do not. Especially for an extended period of time. I promise I'll stop with Dragon Quest 7.
Yeah, no, I mean, for me, it was because I agree with you, Paul. Like, you'll definitely find a party that you're like, this is my party. Like, I'm going to use it for all the big fights, all the boss fights. But for me, it was like when I was out and about and I was on the field and stuff, that's when I'd be like, all right, let's put you three together. Let's put you three together, like, and start doing that. And then when I got to a dungeon, I'm like, all right, serious face on now. It's time to, like, get the gang back together and fuck shit up, you know?
There's a save point here. We've got a boss coming up.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yes.
Now it's time to switch to the real guys.
Yes.
Now, I want to get your guys' opinion on this because you guys enjoy the active time battle system. I do not. I am a plebe. I enjoy my turn-based encounters. I like being able to go get a snack, have a life, go to the bathroom without worrying that I'm going to be annihilated if I forgot to pause the game.
If I forgot to pause the game?
Because,
Are you not capable of thinking on your own?
Tell me this has never happened to you. You're like, all right, I gotta go. And you think you hit start, but apparently you didn't hit it hard enough or whatever. And you throw the controller away, you walk away, and then you come back and you're like, oh, I'm dead. That's never happened.
I can 100% say that has never happened to
Really?
me.
I can 100% say, I'm gonna build on that, Kelly. I can 100% say that has only ever happened to Arnaldo Perez and nobody else on the face of the earth.
I will find one person who will defend me. Speak, make your voices heard, people. I'm calling out to you from the ether.
I can only imagine that you were holding it in for so long, and then eventually you were just like, okay, I gotta go to the bathroom, and you hit pause, and you like threw the controller away, and you didn't even look at the TV to see if it resolved, and you just like ran to the bathroom. That's the only scenario I can think
that
of.
does sound like me. That like I would give myself bladder cancer because I'm like, oh, I'm fighting a kobold. I can't leave now. But what I wanted to ask is, how do you guys in the space that exists between a turn-based style RPG and a fully action RPG, where does the action time battle system rank for you as like your preferred method to play it? And do you think that more modern games or more modern iterations of RPGs should implement a system like this? Because to me it seems like this is not very common anymore. It's mostly you're either going to get a straight up turn-based or a straight up action RPG, or you're going to get Tri-Ace releasing some insane combat mechanic that takes you like 30 hours to understand.
You understand it just as you're finishing the game.
Yeah, you're like, oh, I finally get it now.
Yeah, game over. Damn.
So, Kelly, why don't we start with you?
I actively seek out games that have, like, if a game says gameplay like Chrono Trigger, I will give it a try. I believe Cosmic Star Heroine said that it was going to be like Chrono Trigger.
Okay.
Kind of was, but not really. Black Sigil, which was a DS game, said it was supposed to have. Yeah, that one that was supposed to have Chrono Trigger gameplay. I bought the game. The encounter rate was so high I couldn't get past it. But I did try.
Oops,
but, yeah,
all encounters.
I actively seek out games that say that they have battle systems like Chrono Trigger because I do enjoy it so much.
Yeah. So I'm gonna assume that you would prefer that it became as popular as the other styles of JRPG combat.
Yes. Yes.
Why would you punish me like that?
I think you have to go like one of two ways with it, honestly. Like,
yeah,
you either have the active time battle and you have it kind of, I don't want to say dumbed down, because I don't want to use the word dumb to describe Chrono Trigger's battles, but like you have to have it simplified enough that you're not overwhelmed with options, right? Yeah. Because you have a limited amount of time to make decisions before the boss smacks you in the face, right? Mm-hmm. So you have to kind of limit the options there. So in that way, I prefer that as my preferred RPG battle system unless you have a turn-based game and it adds an incredible amount of complexity and customization. And Arnie, you're going to laugh at me, but Etrian Odyssey is the one that I'm thinking of, right? Like that's a game that does turn-based very, very well, just because of the amount of options that you have in order to solve each fight. And oftentimes you're planning, 3-4 turns in advance to account for the enemy's attack patterns.
Yeah.
That's kind of how you do turn-based. If you want to do turn-based and it's simple, just do active time battle. It's way, way better. It's way more engaging.
Yes.
Two people who don't want me to play video games.
That's not my problem.
Just trying to punish me.
Not my responsibility.
In my mind, there are two schools of thought on JRPG combat. This is official. This is like I've talked to hundreds of thousands of individuals, and we all agree. You're either Legend of Dragoon, where you have like a fun gimmick to make combat more active and engaging, or you're Final Fantasy X, where you're just purely turn-based, but you give me a fucking turn order so I know what the fuck is going to happen. Those are the only two acceptable schools of thought on JRPG combat.
I do like knowing the turn order. I really do. Like, I think that's kind of necessary, because without that, you're risking the whole.
Over here.
You're risking healing before the boss attacks, and there's like, dude, there's nothing worse than casting a big heal spell and then the boss attacks. It's like, come on. That's where Trails of Cold Steel really shines as well. Like it's got that, you can see exactly where everyone's going to go. It's got like the kind of positioning of Chrono Trigger, kind of, sort of, better in a way. Anyway, this is quite the tangent.
So I think we can all agree that I'm right. And ATB battle systems should be outlawed.
I think it's 2 over 1. So
I don't like this question. I'm cutting this from the episode. Paul, make a note.
Duly noted.
All right. So transitioning from the gameplay to the story. Now, like I said, I'm not giving a plot summary here. You want to know the plot? Go read a Wikipedia or play the game. But we have to talk about the sort of the standout aspect of Chrono Trigger's story, which is, in my mind, the time travel, how it's handled in the game. Now, I don't know about you guys, but whenever I consume a piece of media, if I see that it involves time travel, my concern meter goes from like green to orange immediately. Yep. Because once you introduce time travel, you're either going to create like a really engaging, compelling story, or it's going to be a hot mess. It's just going to make no sense, and it's going to make me very upset by the time
there's no middle ground. Yeah, really.
No. There's no like middling time travel story. They're either like successful time travel stories that are like, wow, this is really interesting and cool because like time travel is cool. Or it's like, it looks like 4 different people wrote different pieces of this and never talked to each other. So with that, I was really impressed when I played Chrono Trigger, and I played it late. I want to say I played Chrono Trigger like maybe 4 years ago, like not that long ago. So I went into it with all the hype, all the expectation. I was like, this is apparently an amazing game. Like, I've got to play it. There's no excuse for me anymore to not play it. And when I saw the time travel stuff starting, I was like, all right, well, let's see where it goes. Like, it can't be that bad if everybody thinks it's like amazing. And as I played it, I was like, they fucking nailed it. They did it. They successfully integrated not only the different time periods into the overall story, they integrated like the specific characters' sort of sub-stories in their specific time periods and in other time periods successfully into the story. And it's done so well and so fluidly that you kind of don't even notice it half the time. It just flows together very well from one to the next, to the next, to the next, up until the end. And as we'll talk about a little bit later, even up to the endings, which go into such an excruciating amount of detail, so as to make it like basically inarguable that like this is like an amazing narrative that they've weaved together here on a 16-bit cartridge.
Yeah.
I did want to ask you guys if you had a favorite time period, because this is, I think, the first the first point that I want to integrate my Chrono Trigger personality test. I feel like I can figure out what kind of person you are based on your favorite character, your party composition, and your favorite time period.
Mm-hmm.
So what is your favorite time period, Paul?
It's I don't even know why I'm embarrassed to say it, but like, dude, 65 million BC.
Good man.
Good man.
100%.
Oh boy.
100%.
It's so fun. It's so ridiculous, right? I love Isla as a character. She's just, she's just over the top, right?
Yeah.
And that whole time period is just a lot of fun. It's weird with her because she's hardly ever in my preferred party.
Mm-hmm.
But with that said, well, actually, no, Frog's my favorite character. We'll get to all that in a little while. But Isla's like 1A to Frog's 1. And I love that time period. And also, Jurassic Park vibes.
Only time period you get to dance.
Wait.
Yes.
What about the Millennial Fair? You can dance at the Millennial Fair.
Yeah, it's true. It's true.
That is a fair point. But the party in 65 million BC looks much more fun than the Millennial Fair.
Well, then there's more alcohol there. I'll give you that.
That is true. What
Although
about
I
you,
think
Kelly?
it was
What's your
juice
favorite time
in the
period?
Super Nintendo. But my favorite time period is 12,000 BC.
Ooh, okay.
Yes. My favorite character is actually not even a party member. It's Shala. So, because of that, I just love that time period. The segregation between the two systems, you get to see how it all comes together. The advanced civilization in that primitive time period is just amazing to me. And the music was the soundtrack there. I still have it on my Spotify playlist. So
yeah, and the story
best.
beats that take place in 12,000 BC are probably the most epic parts of that story. Like when you have to face Lavos and what happens with all that, and it's a very compelling part of the story for me as well. But that being said, Paul, dinosaurs. Like, for me, it's 65 million BC, 100%. And the reptiles. I love the reptiles. I love that whole part of the story, that dungeon, and how everything comes together there at the end with the meteorite. All right, so I'm writing these down as we go, and I'm performing personality evaluations that I will reveal on a later episode, I'm sure, because they have to go into like a very complex algorithm. Now, on top of all this, just having how many, does anybody know off the top of their heads how many time periods? I want to say it's at least 6 or 7.
I believe it's 6.
6.
Yeah. So on top of writing all this, like getting stories together for all these time periods, the game then also has 12/13 different endings depending on which version of the game you're playing. So I can't imagine what the script for this game looks like. Like, I can't imagine all the writing that had to go into this, all the, like, reviewing that had to go into it just to be like, okay, so this connects to this, and then this character does this, and that affects this, and this, like, my brain melts out of my ears as I think about it, for real. But what it does, and I think it does very well, and something that I feel like I'm a broken record with this game, but something that it does that sort of pushes me to do something that I don't normally do in JRPGs is that it really incentivizes multiple playthroughs. Usually when I finish a JRPG, I am done. Like, I don't want to see you again. Don't talk to me. Don't write me letters. Like, we're over. But with Chrono Trigger, it's like, 1, I want to see all the different endings, and 2, I want to kick Lavos' ass in all the different time periods.
Yeah,
it's just like really, I don't know, there's something about it. And again, it's just that battle system keeps me coming back. Like, I don't know about you guys, I've only finished it once, but I've definitely started New Game Pluses that I just haven't followed through on. Have any of you played it? Like, have you done New Game Plus? And, how is that experience different from the sort of the base playthrough? Kelly, I'll ask you first.
I have played this game to death. Okay. Like I said, it was $84.99, so I was not going to be getting a new game anytime soon. So I had the game. I did not have the strategy guide because that's what I had. Because
that would have been like another $70.
Yes. So I found out this game had so many different endings, and I had no idea how to get any of them. So when I started New Game Plus, every time on the save screen in the corner it tells you what chapter you're in. Every time that changed, I would go and defeat Lavos.
Oh, okay.
And see if it was a different ending.
Yeah.
And then I'd go to the next chapter. Same thing over and over again throughout the entire game. So I've seen all the endings.
Nice.
And actually, the playthrough I started this week was actually a New Game Plus. So I wanted to go through the whole story, so that's what I'm doing right now. And then I'll go back and get the endings again. But yeah, it's amazing on the second playthrough. You know, it's even easier.
Yeah.
And you get to realize exactly how many of the battles are skippable because there's no point early game to play them. So you're finding the most obtuse routes to get around those enemies.
You get really good at like hugging the edge of the screen and running to the exit.
Mm-hmm.
But that's so good, man. That's so good to have in a New Game Plus, because who wants random battles in New Game Plus? I don't.
Yeah.
Right? The fact that you can skip all these is like, what a credit to the game design.
For real.
Yeah.
No, absolutely.
This is the first game I remember having a New Game Plus.
Yeah.
There may have been others, but this first one I played that had it, and it was an amazing option to have.
I think there were other games that had it, but unless I'm mistaken, Chrono Trigger was actually the first game to use the term New Game Plus. Yeah, and then it just got adopted by the industry.
Mm-hmm. And I even beyond the New Game Plus, just the concept of having multiple endings, I feel like, at least the games I was playing on the Super Nintendo, that was not a thing.
Even now when they say 5 different endings, 6 different endings, sometimes it's just like a 2-second cutscene that's different. And like all of these endings were completely different.
Yeah, no, it's oh god, we'll get into it briefly later. But Paul, tell me, did you dive in New Game Plus for this at all? Were you like curious about the different endings? I know you borrowed the game, so like, did you have to just return it and could play it?
Yeah, no, I had to give it back to my buddy. So I played it once, and that was that. I haven't seen any other endings since then. I picked up the game. Man, I can't remember how long afterwards, but I don't think my tastes were refined yet. So even when I picked it up again, it was like, yeah, it's all right. Yeah. It's only recently when we started talking about doing the episode and I picked it up again that I actually kind of realized, like, wow, this is really actually more special than I remember. That said, you know, it's still 20 hours, so I didn't have the time to finish it again before we recorded this episode.
Yeah, unfortunate. I guess the last thing that I want to touch on before we move on to the characters, the Millennial Fair, often cited, but I want to say, maybe one of the best opening areas in a RPG I've ever played.
Yeah,
truly. For what it, you know, it's nothing like world shattering or mind blowing, but what it does is such a good job of like not only establishing the characters, establishing the tone of the story, but just like letting you get used to the mechanics on your own time. Like there's no time limit, there's no rush to move the story along. You can stay in the Millennial Fair as long as you want. And if you go around and you explore, you can find some like, you know, little fun stuff to do here and there.
Yep.
And you can battle as much as you want. You can get as used to those controls. I feel like a lot of opening areas in JRPGs, especially nowadays, like don't allow for that. They're like, here's the controls. All right, here's your first thing. Kill this many things. Come on, let's go. We got 80 hours of this. We don't have time. Come on.
Need to start with an epic battle.
Yeah, exactly. They give me all my powers right up front so that I can be disappointed for the next 75 hours until I get them all back.
Oh man, that Trails of Cold Steel, like, jeez.
Look at all this cool shit you can do. Now you're gonna have to wait like 100 hours before you can do that again. But wasn't it fun?
Yeah. No, I agree with you on the Millennial Fair, and it has all those. It starts you off really nicely with all the subtle choices that you can make throughout the game that affect things later on.
Yeah,
you know, like when Chrono goes on trial. Right? Like there's all the little things that you've done up to that point, and it all starts with the Millennial Fair. It's really cool, man. Most especially up to that point, like I would say no RPGs, they give you choices, but they're really not choices. Like they don't really, you know, you can't really have an effect on what's going on. You can You can kind of be a jerk if you want, give the jerky response, or you can give the good guy or good girl response, and nothing really changes. But Chrono Trigger, all these little things that you might not even be aware of actually matter.
Yeah.
It's they did it really well, and they don't do it in a way as well. I know I'm rambling here, but like they don't do it in a way that punishes the player.
Yeah.
It's, you know, all these little things that happen are either rewarding or they just kind of change things in a certain way. Yeah. And there's little details that you get to notice. You're very rarely just outright punished, you know, in another timeline or whatever for making a wrong choice.
Yeah.
So the big question is, on your first playthrough, did you accidentally eat the lunch?
Oh, see, here's the thing. You say accidentally as if I didn't deserve that lunch.
Poor guy's wife made it for him.
I did eat the lunch, and I felt really bad, and I think I may have reloaded to give him the lunch because I was tortured by it. But no, it you know, one thing I will say, we're gonna move on to the characters, but I'm gonna issue Paul a warning because if there's one thing we don't tolerate on the show, it's rambling, and so that's unacceptable.
No rambling, no tangents, on topic. We should take a break though, Arnie.
Oh, yeah. All right. We'll take a break right here, and then we'll come back. We'll talk about the characters and some of the endings, and then we'll move along. So stay tuned, guys. Back, and it's time to talk some characters. And if you've ever listened to one of our JRPG episodes, this is always a very important part. I also wrote our Persona 4 outline, and I essentially developed it around all the characters, and I almost did the same thing in Chrono Trigger, and I was like, I can't do that to people again. Just listening to us argue for half an hour about who's the best husbando or whatever.
But that was the best part of the Persona 4 episode.
Yes, absolutely. But you can only pull that trick out of your hat like once every like 2 or 3 years. I gotta save it for a good episode, which is gonna be when we do Chrono Cross and we talk extensively about all the 45 characters in that game. I'm gonna save it for Suikoden 2. But yes, so let's start off main character, Chrono. Actually, I did not realize this, even though I played this game, that in the translated version, he's Crono as opposed to Chrono in the Japanese version. And I was like, the game's called Chrono Trigger. Why wouldn't you just call him Chrono with an H?
I don't get it, dude. I also don't understand why they would change it for the like, out of Japanese or Americans, who do you think is more likely to say Trono with the CH, right?
Yeah.
Yet somehow in Japan they left the H in there and trusted their people to know that it was Chrono.
That it's a
Yet
silent
here
H.
in North America, they were like, "Ooh, I don't know, man. If we leave that H in there, crazy shit can happen."
Don't want to confuse the kids. They're already like on the fence about this whole genre.
Yeah.
Very true.
So, I mean, if you're talking mid to late 90s, and you're talking JRPG, you're talking about a spiky-haired silent protagonist, and do I have the man for you? It's Chrono. Though I will give him credit, despite the lack of dialogue, which we've talked about on this podcast before, Paul, and I can't remember what our consensus was, but I am not a fan of the silent protagonist. Not my favorite. I think that all protagonists should just have their own personality. My personality is not the personality of a hero. I don't want to see myself reflected in a game like that.
Man, this debate is endless. Like the silent protagonist was definitely Yuji Horii bringing that in. He was the one who really believed in the idea of the silent protagonist, and he kind of flexed a bit. You know, I'm pretty sure Sakaguchi didn't want that, but Horii was like, nope, this is what we're doing. I'm pulling rank. and that's what they did. And whether it works or not, like, I still don't know the answer. I still don't. Like, I remember, I know you don't like it. I could go either way, because, like, I think it was in the Persona 4 episode that I mentioned, like, if your main character is kind of a jerk, then the whole dating sim element doesn't really work.
Yeah.
You know, like, because, like, I don't want him to be happy. You know what I'm saying? So the silent protagonist is great in that way.
Yeah.
And while Chrono Trigger doesn't necessarily have a dating sim aspect, it does have, like, Chrono and Marl. Mm-hmm. So, you know, I think it works ultimately.
Yeah.
But I can understand, like, why you wouldn't want to go that way. I don't know. Kelly, what do you think?
I'm not gonna lie. When I first played this game, I didn't even realize he was a silent protagonist until later. There was enough personality and, like, the movements and everything else of the sprite that I didn't even realize it. And then someone was like, you know, he didn't say anything the whole time. And I went back and went, holy crap, you're right. So it worked for me because I didn't even realize it until later on.
Yeah. No, the animations they got out of that sprite are insane. Like, I haven't dug deep into the Super Nintendo library, but from what I've played, that was an incredibly expressive sprite, and it really does give him somewhat of a personality despite the lack of dialogue. So I think Chrono Trigger is that happy medium. I just don't know that you can do something like that with today's technology. Somehow, my brain just thinks that sprites can be more expressive than, like, polygonal, like, realistic looking people without talking.
You can be more exaggerated and that looks very silly. Yeah.
Yeah. If you have a realistic looking face and it has exaggerated expressions, then it's like a horror movie. You know, like, it's not. It doesn't look quite as cool and fun.
Yeah, but no, they made Chrono just the perfect equal measures adorable, and I could take him serious. Like, he definitely had both of those. Especially with the anime cutscenes. Love those damn things.
And I find them shoehorned in because I'm so used to the Super Nintendo version, playing it so much, that those animations just take me out of the moment in the DS version. Yeah,
I could see that if you grew up playing the Super Nintendo version. For me, it was the first version I ever played, so I was like, oh, sweet, dope anime cutscenes. I didn't really think about it beyond that. And I guess the other thing I want to point out about Chrono is the fact that he does. Paul had mentioned it before. He does disappear from the story for a while. He dies. He sacrifices himself, which normally I would not mention because, again, it's another thing that I'm like, he's gonna come back. He's the main character, but because of the way Chrono Trigger is structured, not only do you have the choice to never bring him back, which is wild to me, and you can still finish the game without doing that, but you could also finish the game even before you get the option to bring him back to life, which is, again, wild.
Oh, it's so cool, man. I think in the original design document, Hori actually wanted Chrono just dead, period, with no option to bring him back.
I would believe that.
They wanted to make a game that had never been made before, right? And Aerith didn't exist yet.
Yep.
So they wanted to make Chrono the guy to kind of, like, usher in this new age of, like, characters who can just die off. And I think it was actually Square Brass that were like, I mean, that's a little bit too dark, guys.
If there's one guy that knows a little thing about killing main characters and bringing them back, it is Akira Toriyama. The man loves to kill everybody as long as they come back.
Man, it's a good thing he didn't actually work on the plot or anything for this game. It's actually a really good thing. I'm happy that he just stuck to the design and that was it.
So the longest dungeon in this game is Heaven for some reason. It's like 5 times as long as every other dungeon. Mr. Toriyama, what is this? And he's just like, listen, the kids will love it. Don't worry about it.
Look, roads are supposed to be long.
Oh, Lord. But just overall, like, taking all this into account, how do we feel in general about Chrono as a main character, Paul? Like, when you think about him as opposed to some of the other big 16-bit JRPGs that you really loved growing up, like is he a character that stands out to you at all? Like do you think about like him as a within that pantheon of like epic video game characters?
Within the world of Chrono Trigger itself, he is the last character I think of.
Really?
This is the problem with the silent protagonist, right? The silent protagonist is not memorable. Like if Solid Snake was a silent protagonist, would he be Solid Snake? Like no, he'd be lame, right? Like so it's simultaneously a knock against the silent protagonist in this case, and also a argument for how great the characters are otherwise in Chrono Trigger. Because in my opinion, every other character outshines Chrono here. Yeah.
Is it the same for you, Kelly? Or do you have a little bit more love than Heartless Paul?
I don't, dislike Chrono, but I do agree that all the other characters bring a lot more to the table in development-wise and everything else.
It's hard to argue against that point. I mean, they given their time to shine and their personalities, they really jump off the screen a lot more than Chrono does. But spiky hair, spiky red hair, katana, like this does nothing for you people.
Hey man, the design, look, it's a Toriyama special, right? Yeah. Like it really kind of hits all his beats. And I mean, for Marl, like, great for her. Like, she finds a husbando who will just never argue with her.
There you
right?
go.
Like, she's always right. That sounds like a dream.
Yes. Katana wielding Gohan is not one of my favorite characters in the game, but I don't know. I grew attached to him. I'll say that. He's not my least favorite. But he's in the bottom half of the conversation. So then we have Marl. Secretly Princess Nadia. You would never guess, just given the way that she's presented and everything. Never guess that she's not. Her name isn't Marl. I was never clear on that.
I've heard both.
Sorry, Kelly. What did you think it was?
Marl. I've heard both though. So
okay.
I think for the longest time I called her Marley, but I was like, that can't possibly be her name. They wouldn't spell it like this.
Yeah, they wouldn't, except that Marl is like a...
It sounds like an off-brand cigarette or something.
Yeah, it sounds like a punch in the face of a name. You know what I mean? Like, it's not...
Well, it's not a real name either.
I know.
So she chose it.
It is her code name, like her secret identity.
That really means she chose it, so she likes the name.
Yeah, that is true. I wonder if it was more like she ran into somebody and she couldn't reveal who she was. She was like, my name is Marl.
Mr. Snub.
I don't know. Did you guys for me, Marl was like, you are my healer until I get a character I like more than you that can do this. Like, I like her arc and I like her as a character, but as a functional party member, early game to mid game, and then I switched her out pretty quickly. What
she
about
was in
you,
my
Kelly?
party at all time.
You were in.
Me too.
Wow. Okay.
Never left.
All right.
Yep.
Well, I'm just full of great opinions today, I guess. That's what I'm learning. Then we have Luca Ashteer, Chrono's childhood friend and a prolific inventor. Her inventing skills sort of come into play with another character we're going to talk about. Again, a character that I really enjoy. Probably my favorite design. Design-wise, I think Luca is my favorite. She looks cool. And she looks extremely Toriyama. She's like steampunk Bulma to me. Like, she's just, I don't know. There's something about her look and the way she acts that I'm like, you're so cool. So much cooler than I am. But again, not one that I kept in my party a whole lot. Early game, and then I switched her out for somebody else. What about you, Paul? What was your Luca take?
Love Luca. But agree with you, not in my party all that much. Yeah. Mainly in the party as, for example, with Robo. Mm-hmm. Just kind of there to see all her techs, right? But beyond that, didn't really use her all that much. That said, love her as a character. Extremely well designed. Can I just, dude, Toriyama really hit it out of the park with this game. Like, all the characters are just so full of color and character, and like, it's funny because with Dragon Ball, I don't really get that from him that much. Like, I feel like a lot of the stuff in Dragon Ball is interchangeable.
Yeah.
But it felt like with Chrono Trigger, somehow bizarrely, he was just kind of able to flex a bit more. And you have all these cool designs, like from the machines in the world to the monsters to the characters. It all just kind of drips with that flavor. Very unique. Very, you know, I don't want to... Like, I don't want to kind of compare because it's kind of apples and oranges, but like it kind of almost has that Phantasy Star feel to it in that you have like, you know, the magic combined with the tech, and it's seamless. It's great. And Luca, to bring it back to her, like just dripping with flavor. Like, you look at Luca and you know exactly what kind of character she is. There's very little doubt. She's not going to be like evil. She's not the brute. You know what I'm saying? Like, you can just tell from looking at her that she's kind of the whimsical nerd, and she's great.
What about you, Kelly? What's your take on Luca?
Luca was not in my party very often.
Okay.
But she had probably my favorite backstory side quests in the game.
Yes.
And
agreed.
Once again, when I was younger and I was stupid to video games, I could not figure out passcode to save her mother.
Yeah.
And it killed me for so long. And when I finally figured it out, I was like, okay, we're going to save her every time now. So.
Oh, Lord. It's one of those, man. It you know, that when I first experienced it while I was playing, I was like, why is this in this? Why am I doing this? Like, and I saved her, but I was still like, this was unnecessary. This was inappropriate. I do not want this in my video game.
Yeah. Just seeing her up and walking, her mother, who you find out her name's Lara because of the password, just seeing her up and walking around at the end of the game, I was like, yes, saved her.
I never got that. I never actually knew that you could save her until years and years later. Yeah, I thought that was just one of the story beats.
Yeah,
and
I mean,
the whole
knowing
password
Kato,
thing was there.
That is probably what he wanted. He was just like, force them to watch this.
The players must know life is tragic.
Life is pain.
But yeah, no, I thought the whole password thing was just kind of like a, just like a red herring.
Yeah. So Luca sadly falls into the lower tier. Now we get to Frog, and here's my unpopular opinion again. Everybody loves Frog. I like Frog. Frog is great. He has a great story. I love his design. He's actually part of my main rotation party. But I just don't get... To me, he seems like universally the most beloved character. And I'm just like... Fine. Like...
You just have to be a contrarian, don't you? You just have to be the hipster.
I don't get it.
I actually agree with that take. So.
Oh my god!
I don't get it.
And, like, I was looking at a popularity poll, and it was like Frog was head and shoulders above everyone else for this game. And I was just like, but why? But why?
In a world where Robo exists, how is he not the best?
I'll tell you exactly why Frog is everybody's favorite character. Not the best character, because that's subjective.
Yeah.
Even though he's the best character. But the reason that made Quentin Tarantino's career is that everybody loves a revenge story.
Yeah.
And when the revenge story involves a person turned into a frog, which is just, it harkens back to fairy tales from when we were kids, everybody loves that. And I know the original translation for the SNES, Frog's Shakespearean tone is a little bit over the top.
Yeah.
They kind of like... Yeah, a little bit. They kind of corrected that a bit with the DS version.
Yeah.
Nonetheless, it makes him very unique among all the characters. Like when Frog talks, it's Frog, right? Like if you'd made the screen blank and just had the dialogue box, you would know exactly who it is when he's the one talking.
Yeah.
So you have all these, and he has the Mazmune, which I know it's Masamune, but like, Ninja Gaiden, right? It's the Mazmune. So he has the Mazmune, he has all these cool beats, great backstory. Frog, man.
Just Frog.
He took the name Glenn and made it cool. Like that alone.
All right, Kelly, I need to give you frog space here because you're going to agree with me, so I'm gonna be on top for once.
Yeah, I mean, he was in my major party rotation, but as a character and as the backstory, maybe I just don't care for the revenge plots. I don't know, but plus I liked Magus, so that kind of dropped Frog on the priority scale for me.
I killed Magus.
I did my first playthrough because I didn't realize you could.
The Hot Topic kid in me would not allow me to harm that person. He is going through things.
We'll get to Magus in a minute. Sorry,
yes.
I don't want to jump the gun.
We surely shall get to Magus or Magus. This is what I'm telling you, man. Like, but moving on is Robo, who I love. I love Robo. He's never in my party, much like Luca. Love him to death. Think his personality is great. Loved his side quests with the forest. That was some of the most beautiful shit I've ever seen in a game. Yeah. His lost love, all that. Robo's just great. I love Robo to death. I had him in my character. When I got him, he was part of my rotation for a while. But then when you get other characters, I feel like they do what he does better. You know? And so I never found a reason to keep him around. But once we reveal our parties, I feel like I'll again be chastised and yelled at. But no, I just everything about Robo I think is super cool. I'm a big sci-fi guy, so like even like 2300 AD is probably my second favorite time period, and Robo is just he fits in so perfectly. From the way he comes to your party, to the backstory leading up to him, to his side quests, like there was no part of Robo's story that I wasn't 100% in on all the time. What about you, Kelly? What do you think of Robo?
I thought he was okay.
How dare you?
I'm sorry. He came from that time period. The bleakness of it, I think I just didn't give him much of a chance because he was from my least favorite time period.
Yeah, as compared to the other time periods, it's like, wow, there's a lot of gray here.
Yeah.
Yeah. Can I say one thing though about that time period?
Sure.
And this just kind of goes into a greater point about Lavos.
Mm.
I loved Lavos as the big bad in this game, specifically because of his longevity. Like this whole 65 million years thing, it gives him this epic feel, and the fact that there is a visible effect from his cataclysmic return, so to speak, right? Like you go to 2300, it's like, ooh man, this shit's bleak, Lavos is a bad dude, instead of kind of like your average game up to that point where here's your big bad guy whose effects are heretofore unknown, except that he is bad.
They're just like, he's very bad. Right. Please take him seriously or you will regret it.
He's going to take these crystals, man. Bad shit's going to happen when he gets them all. Don't you worry. So
and then you go to 2300, you're like, holy shit.
Yeah. So that's the thing. Like, even though 2300 is super bleak, and I agree with you, Kelly, it's like my least favorite of the timelines. I do love the purpose that it serves, which is kind of, really hammering home just what a bad thing Lavos is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I definitely agree it was necessary, but still didn't much like playing through it. So
no, of course not.
But Paul, give us your take on Robo then. Are you gonna agree with me and make me powerful once again?
I love Robo. He's probably my third favorite after Isla and Frog. Yeah, he's just, look, man, it's the old Iron Giant thing, right? Like the technological, if somehow evocative, the Wall-E, evocative kind of robot who with the heart of gold, who eventually discovers that he has a heart. Like it's when I say it like that, it almost feels tropey. Like we do have the Wizard of Oz. And the Wizard of Oz Tin Man kind of serves like a similar kind of purpose in a way. So I can't really say Robo's super original or anything, but he's Robo, man. Yeah. Like that. I've listened to all kinds of different stories told 100 different ways,
Yeah.
even though they're the same story.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't make Robo any less
Yeah.
that something like him has been done before. Just like it makes Frog no different than
Mm-hmm.
anything that was done by, in our old fairy tales or revenge stories
Yep.
and so on. So yeah, I love Robo.
All right. I mean, I agree. I think you're right in this particular instance. But now we're gonna move on to your favorite and my favorite. Ayla, Ilea.
Isla. I say Isla. Kelly, what do you say?
I think I said Ayla.
Ayla.
When I first saw
Ayla?
it. Yeah.
So as usual, Arnie's wrong. That's cool. I'm glad we're consistent.
What? I'm not gonna lie for your benefit. I'm not gonna pretend that I conform to your norms of JRPG character pronunciation. Probably, maybe one of the simpler characters as far as her story goes, but maybe the one that I think is the most full of personality. Personally,
In a way,
like she's just so kinetic, so expressive, kind of like Chrono, because she's a cave woman or cave person. So her language, at least in the translation, was like, "Me want food, fight." Like I don't know why they did that. I don't know. I guess if I was in it, I don't know what I would do personally. But I like that because they went that route, they also made her like extremely like expressive, so it's very clear no matter what she's saying, like happy, sad, angry, mostly angry, beating people up. And I'm a sucker for a hand-to-hand combat person in RPGs. I love Kung Fu Masters. I love I think monks also do unarmed. I love all that stuff. So Ayla was 100% always in my party from the moment that I got her. Never left. Just a DPS monster, like the tank that I always wanted. But Paul, tell me before I give Kelly the floor so we can find out, because I don't think she said how she feels about Ayla, but I want to know how you feel about Ayla.
I love Ayla for the same reasons you do. I don't know that there's much I can say to expand on that. Mm-hmm. Like, she runs on all fours. You know what I mean? Like, she's very physically expressive. Yeah. The sprite work on her is excellent. Again, not something I appreciated back then, but I can definitely appreciate it now. She's very, like, kind of consistent with the feel of the game. Mm-hmm. The game itself is very lighthearted and fun, even though there's, like, a cataclysm and they're trying to prevent it and all that kind of stuff. But, like, it's not a dark game by any stretch, and Ayla really just kind of elevates that whole theme, I think, anyway. And, dude, Chrono hits her with lightning, and then she attacks with lightning fists. Like, that's so cool.
Yeah, her attacks are always ridiculous. What about you, Kelly?
Ayla is a character. I do love her.
Woo!
One thing I must say about one thing I have to say about this entire cast, but with Ayla in particular, is how selfless they are. Because if you think about it, the fact Lavos, what happens in the world getting destroyed, happens so far out of their time periods. They're going to be long dead and gone by the time it happens. Yeah. Yet they still risk their lives to go through all these time periods to save the world and to save the future. And Ayla, it's 65 million years in the future.
Like she can't even comprehend what they're talking about. She's like,
and she's just like, sure. My friends need help, so let's go save the world. Sure.
Yep. And that speaks to another thing about the game too. And this is kind of like the comparison to Final Fantasy VI, where I think in Chrono Trigger the game kind of focuses more on the characters than it does necessarily on the plot. You know what I mean? Like the whole Cataclysm and Lavos, that's all well and good, but really I find that there's a lot of focus through the side stories too, especially. There's a lot of focus on the characters and fleshing them out and building them and making you kind of fall in love with them. So. Yeah. Compared to something like, again, Final Fantasy VI, where there's just so many characters and it's kind of difficult to, at least for me anyway, to identify with them, that really makes a difference in Chrono Trigger. And I think that's another reason why people love it so much. And the good nature of these characters, like it just, it shines through, like you said, Kelly. they're lovely people. I'd love to be friends with all of them, especially Chrono, because he could just listen to me ramble on, and he'd have to just take it.
Yeah, it reminds me of kind of like what we talked about with Persona 4. I believe these characters are friends. I want them to be my friends.
Yes.
I want to hang out with them. They are really fun, cool, nice, selfless people. And it shines through over the course of time. And then there's Magus, who is probably none of those things, but is also one of my favorite characters. Because I brooding, like, dark anti-hero in JRPG is like recipe. Like, my Vincent Valentine is Magus. Like, I love Vincent, I love Magus. It's a problem, but I'm not gonna fix it. So Magus to me has also the most complex sub-story. It's the one that I feel is most intertwined with the actual main story, and it definitely, once I learned it in the game, it probably changed my opinion of him more than anything that happened to any other character did. I always liked Magus. I thought his design was really cool. I was like, oh yeah, hell yeah, I'm gonna have this dude in my party all the time. And then I was like, I don't like you in my party. So then he wasn't. But when I learned his story, I was like, this is like, I love this character now. Like, it really took him from one level to the next in my eyes once I got the full scope of what he had been through. Kelly, I know that you had mentioned you like Magus, but do you feel sort of the same way? Like, was it something where you were all in on him right from the beginning, or as the story progressed, you sort of grew to love him a little bit more?
As the story progressed, once you saw him as a child, his only friend being a cat, and his love for his sister, just that bond, the fact that he was willing to travel through the ages, try to get her back.
Yeah,
that resonated. It was a great backstory for him.
Did he make it into your party?
No, he did not. I mean, he came so late, and the fact that there weren't any like texts, that double and triple texts with him, it just made it a lot harder to integrate him in the party when I already had my set party. Yeah. At that point, plus the first time I did kill him, so didn't even. I mean, it wasn't even a thought up to that point. Being able to get the main antagonist in your party, it wasn't something. So you had the chance to. I figured if I said no, I don't want to fight you, they would just force it anyway. So
exactly.
Yeah, I'm going to fight you. Whoops, he's dead. Oh well.
Oh well. Well, Paul, I think we know how you feel about Magus, but.
No, I didn't say I don't like him. Yeah, no. Look, I mean, for my boy Frog, we had to do that guy, right? Like, there was no, he had to get iced. There's no debate.
No ifs, ands, or buts about it.
But with that said, I really, it's like you said, Arnie, Magus is probably the deepest kind of character in the game from, like, his backstory, and like you said, Kelly, like, his backstory is touching. The fact that you find out he wants to resurrect Lavos so he can actually kill him. Like, he's like the dark dude, but then you find out he has good intentions. I also like that the fact that he doesn't have techs, I think, is kind of thematically appropriate, or he doesn't have like double, triple.
Because he doesn't cooperate. He doesn't work well with others.
Exactly.
He's the loner.
He's always going to kind of be on the outside looking in, which is, a little bit sad, but also appropriate, right? Yeah. And I like that the gameplay reflects that about him. So he's definitely a worthwhile addition to the game. Like, he doesn't make me smile like Isla and Robo, and he doesn't fill me with passion like Frog, but he's in there and he does a job and he does it very well, and I appreciate him for that.
Yeah. So did not make it into your party, I presume.
Oh God, no. Are you kidding?
He was dead. How could he?
Oh no. Also, quick shout out to translator Ted Woolsey for making Magus's generals Ozzy, Slash, and Flea. So fun. I really enjoyed that.
Pretty brilliant. I know in the Japanese one, they gave them, the usual Toriyama kind of vegetable names.
Yeah.
I think they were like soy sauce and some,
they were
a couple of
condiments.
Ketchup.
yeah, condiments. That's it.
Yeah.
So yeah, good on them to not call them mayonnaise.
Yeah. And so those are your 6 party members. But Kelly did mention before, and she actually reminded me of this because I would have left it out. I'm not even gonna lie, but there is one non-playable character that is integral to the story, and we should touch on briefly, and that is Shala, and she is Magus's older sister. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. And so she has her own story that's a big part of not only Chrono Trigger's story, but she's sort of the bridge, I think, that connects Trigger through Radical Dreamers to Cross. She sort of arcs the whole thing. Do you feel that's fair, Kelly?
Yes, I do.
And so, again, not a playable character, but does have a very, much like Magus, has a very compelling story to tell, and one that I think the game is ultimately made better by her inclusion in. I feel like in another JRPG, she would have been like a MacGuffin, for lack of a better word. Like, somebody's got to possess the evil. You get over here. Okay, this is sister. Here she is. Oh, she's possessed now. Look at that. Oh my god. But I feel like Chrono Trigger is like, no, here's the backstory of all this. Like, this is why you should care about this character. Here's what she's been trying to do and how it's all gone horribly wrong for her. And then the fact that you get to follow her, like, if you're committed, if you are a Chrono Trigger fan, like if you've played Trigger, Cross, Radical Dreamers, you are following the story of Shala. Like when people say, oh, if you watch Star Wars, it's not Luke Skywalker's story, it's Anakin Skywalker's story. That's how I feel like Chrono Trigger is, kind of. It's not the people that you control and interact with, it's the people that sort of make up the actual narrative behind the scenes. Do you think that's fair, Paul? Like my description?
Oh yeah. No, I agree. Sadly I don't have much to expand on that, but I agree with your point.
Yeah. And Kelly, I just wanted to ask you, like, the way you've talked to me about it, it seems like you really like Shala. Like, she was a very impactful character for you, a character you seem to like pretty much just as much as you like some of the party members. Is there a particular reason for that? Is something about her story like connect with you when you first played this game?
Okay, so story time. Once again, when I was playing this game, no idea that like internet wasn't really a thing. Mm-hmm. So you were basically going in blind.
Okay.
Shala, to me, when she disappeared,
mm-hmm.
I was like, where'd she go? What happened? So back then, the DS version didn't exist. There was no Radical Dreamers, nothing. Yeah. So her story just ended.
Yeah.
And I because the game was wrapped up so well in every other spot, I just could not accept the fact that it just ended. So I actually spent, I have no idea how many hours just going to every single time period, trying to figure out clues, going to just talking to every single NPC, trying to figure out what happened to Shala, because it was just this huge loose end. And I mean, her sprite work is gorgeous.
Yes.
Let's face it, it's a beautiful sprite, and it was, a girl that had all this power but wanted to do good with it. Mm-hmm. But she was forced by her mother to just do this evil thing, and basically pretty much the catalyst of destroying the world.
Yeah.
So, and the fact that she just disappeared from the game gutted me, and I just was going around forever trying to figure out what happened. And then I found out that there was a game, Radical Dreamers, that kind of explained what was going on, but it wasn't available in English.
Yeah.
So
that just you started down the path.
Oh yes. Yes.
So to wrap this section up real quick, I think we've made it pretty clear who our favorite characters are. So we don't need to get back into this discussion and how I'm correct. But I think now is the time that we have to reveal who our go-to party was. So I'm going to start with Kelly first. Who were top 3 people? Who are you picking?
Chrono.
Okay.
Frog. Marl.
Okay. I can see it. It's wrong, but I can appreciate it.
Hey, I was young and I needed extra healing,
Fair
so
enough.
that's all I can put.
Yeah, you doubled up on the white magic there.
Oh, yeah.
Paul, give them to me.
I think I spoiled it earlier, but Chrono, Frog, Marl.
Mm-hmm.
And
See?
it's because I'm old and I need extra healing.
There you go.
Chrono, Frog, Isla.
I can't argue with that.
Still a great team.
party.
So.
Mega damage. I just want to punish people as fast as possible.
There you go.
If the battle goes past a certain point, then I'm gonna die. Just violently press like, Frog, heal me, damn it. So with that, what I'd like to do is take one last break. We're gonna come back and we're gonna wrap this whole thing up. So see you guys on the other side of that. And we back. Time to wrap up this whole Chrono Trigger mess that we've created for ourselves. So now we're going to get into the most easily understandable, organized, not at all confusing part of the game, the ending. 12 endings in the Super Nintendo version. They added a 13th ending in the DS version because there's one thing Chrono Trigger was lacking, was endings. I think we can all universally agree on that. You know, there's so many of them. I'm not gonna just recite them to people because one, it'd be incredibly boring, and two, it kind of strips away some of the magic of getting them yourself.
Agree.
But I do want to ask you guys, it's kind of how we've structured this episode. I want you to pick out maybe one or two of your favorite endings. Kelly, let's start with you. Can you give me like one or two that you really enjoyed?
First off would be probably your happiest ending, the one that you would get if you played through everything, did all the side quests and everything else.
Yeah.
Basically, that parade at the end, I just remember it being like a celebration. So just that celebration I enjoyed so much, and it just felt like a great ending to the game. You get to see all the characters saying goodbye, going back to their own time periods, and then you get to see little epilogues of them living their lives. So
nice. Yeah.
And I still want to know how they figured out that Isla was Marl's ancestor over 65 million years.
Now you see here, we've kept excellent records.
Especially when you see in 12,000 BC, there's not many people left. So where was the descendant there?
I figure they've mastered time travel. Surely somebody has come up with DNA testing.
Yeah, it's Luca. She did.
Yeah.
Is there another ending that like particularly stood out to you?
The Dream Team ending, the one where you just that's more just a point of pride, being able to say I've seen it, just because you have to beat it pretty much at the very beginning of the game. So even on New Game Plus, you're not at a full party, so you got to figure it out and get it done.
You're gonna have to finish the game probably 2 or 3 times before you're probably strong enough at the beginning of the game to kill Lavos.
Yes.
All right. What about you, Paul? Shoot me a couple quick endings here that people should be aware of.
Just hearing these endings, I'm all hyped. I'm all hyped to play this game again. And you know, we talk about a lot of games on the show, and I'm especially like right after, I'm hyped to play all of them. Yeah. Like I was so hyped to play Advance Wars. You know what I mean? But like a lot of these games, they're too long, right? Chrono Trigger avoids that. I am looking forward really legitimately to getting back into it. I'm gonna pop that cart into the Super Nintendo and play it as soon as I can, or rather continue to play, because I did start again. And hearing Kelly's endings, and like I got to get that Dream Team ending, that's for sure.
Good luck.
I have to. It's a challenge. I love the ending, and to be frank, like I haven't experienced all these. Like I didn't earn them. This is a YouTube thing. But the ending where Marl and Luca are talking about how hot some of the guys are.
Yes.
That features Chrono's only 2 lines of dialogue in the entire game.
Yes.
Oh man, I didn't even notice that.
That's what Wikipedia told me.
Now I really gotta watch it just so I can see if that happens. But to me, that just struck me as the coolest thing. So yeah.
Nice. Is there any other one that like springs to mind, or is that one your A number one with a bullet?
Those are the 2 that I really want to see.
Okay.
Those are the 2 that I want to earn, right? Because like, you can watch these things on YouTube, but it's not the same. It's not the same as actually playing the game and earning it. That's just my opinion anyway.
I'm gonna be honest with you guys. I was still trying to decide while you guys were talking. I think what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna combine 2 of them, because I love the endings where they recreate the opening of the game. Both the Dino version, where everyone's a reptile because you didn't defeat the reptiles in 65 million
yeah, that's
BC,
right.
and the futuristic one where it plays out with Robo and his love interest Atropos XR, where she's Marl, he's Chrono, and they sort of bump into each other and they get to sit on a mountaintop and look at the sunset or whatever. It's beautiful.
No, that's pretty sweet.
And I can't believe that Paul did not pick. They call it the Oath, but it's the one where basically Frog goes back and fights Magus, and they put a silhouette on top of the castle, but you can't tell whose silhouette it is. It's that's the most suspenseful ending, I think, and the one that I think if you like the revenge story, that's the one you gotta go for.
Oh man, but then you don't know how it ends. That's the whole point.
But there's so many. I mean, there's so many good ones, including the Dream Team ending, which I honestly like. I think, like Kelly said, like if you're going for the Dream Team ending, it's not to get like a particularly good ending. It's to have the satisfaction of knowing that you crushed this game beneath the heel of your foot and are now ultimately powerful.
Well, and seeing the developers, like, yes,
in
for
little
the challenge,
sprite
but
form,
yeah, like I don't think up to that point I had ever seen that in a game.
No.
I mean, you have closing credits, so you know who these people are, but like to actually see them like in little sprite form and so on, that's, I don't know, man, that's really cool. And you know what? Well deserved.
Yeah. But, I mean, like I said, so many endings. You should go, if you don't want to play the game, which you should, or you already played the game and you don't want to play it again, which you should, you can go to YouTube, watch them, read about them. They're great. So, with all that said, I think that we can say, I think you basically know where this is going to wrap up. Like, the game releases $84.99 plus tax. Universal acclaim. I think as close to universal acclaim as you probably ever get in the video game industry. Sold, I think, fairly well. I always hesitate to say that like 16-bit RPGs sell well, just because of like what was the standard of selling well? Selling well as compared to like other JRPGs, or selling well as compared to like Super Mario World. And this being a late release probably didn't help. It's known for being quite expensive nowadays, especially if you're looking for a box copy. But it did what I think what the creator set out to do, they did in spades. They gave people a very unique experience that I think to this day helps it stay relevant. I don't feel like I've ever really played another game that I could be like, wow, this does what Chrono Trigger does, but better. Chrono Trigger still sits in sort of its own lane in that perspective. And so obviously there were re-releases. You got the I think sort of infamous PS1 Final Fantasy Chronicles release, which if what I've read is to be believed, was originally supposed to be a separate release that bundled Chrono Trigger and Radical Dreamers, which to me makes a lot more sense, because that always, whenever I saw Final Fantasy Chronicles, I was like, why is Chrono Trigger in this? Like, it's a great game, but this makes no sense to me thematically why it would be here. And so now I kind of understand. For Paul, it was probably a dream come true because it was his favorite Final Fantasy game bundled with Chrono Trigger.
I mean, like, yeah, but even at that time, even as I was totally a mark for next-gen consoles, I don't think I ever uttered the phrase, you know what this game needs? Loading times.
Yeah.
Fair enough.
So, you know,
and they're
like...
bad, too.
Yeah. It's the game is sort of infamous for its long loading times. But listen, if Akira Toriyama had to draw and animate all these sweet anime cutscenes...
I know.
I feel they were
great.
I feel like it's worth it. I feel like people went through more effort to find like subbed Evangelion episodes than they ever did waiting for the loading times of this game to load. 3 seconds of sweet, sweet animation. And then of course there's the DS release, which I'm scared to say, but I would call the definitive version of Chrono Trigger. I think if you're going to buy a version and you've never played Chrono Trigger, like you're going inside unseen, get the DS version. It's cheaper and it's probably, all things considered, with the quality of life improvements, the map, the fact that the lower screen now holds all your menus so the top screen is more unencumbered, the improved translation, I think it's just the version to get. Do either of you disagree with that? Would you recommend the Super Nintendo version over the DS version?
I'm a purist, so honestly, I would go with the Super Nintendo version. Just because some of the additions, they tried so hard with the animation to tie into Chrono Cross.
Yeah.
And I think it was to the detriment of the game. You have a scene where it basically shows what's going to happen to some of the characters, which is not good. So I want my happy ending, and the allusions to Chrono Cross just kind of ruined it for me. I did like the extra ending, of course, where Shala was involved, and that tied into Chrono Cross. But I still prefer the Super Nintendo version.
What about you, Paul? Where do you stand on this divide?
It all depends on who you are, because there are some games where let's take, we were just talking about it in chat the other day, Phantasy Star 2.
Yeah.
Right? You can play the re-release on one of those Sega Genesis collections. I can't remember which, but I think PS3.
Yeah.
And what they do in that game is they improve the walk speed, right? And so if you're going to play a version, you play that one because it's just way more playable. Chrono Trigger on the SNES doesn't really have any of those issues. So if you want a pure nostalgic experience, then you play the SNES one. That's how I play it personally. I'm very fortunate to have a copy and the original hardware and all that, and it feels nice in a way the DS version can't, right? With that said, though, I mean, look, if all you have is access to the DS version, you have access to what is commonly considered the superior definitive version, and there's a good reason for that, right? You're not shortchanging yourself by getting the DS version either. So either way, you're okay. The only problem with the DS version is that it's really climbed in price over the last couple of years. They used to have them. Man, they used, Square Enix, I think on their store, they were giving these things away like candy for the longest time. I wish I had bought a copy, but I already had the SNES one, so I was like, screw it. I don't like buying the same game twice. And now I see how much it's worth, and it's like, oh man, I kind of wish I had got it.
If I'm not mistaken, Kelly might know more about this than I do, but I think there are 2 versions of the DS version. I think there was an original print run that came with a poster.
A poster, yes.
And that one is
that's the one I have.
I don't think I have the poster version. I bought the subsequent print run, but I got mine for $20 back in the day, so I can't complain.
But the thing is, my copy is open, and I do play it, and that's the version I'm playing right now, honestly, because sitting on a couch watching TV while playing Chrono Trigger,
exactly.
I mean, you can't go wrong with any version, really. I'd even say, if you don't have if you can't afford the DS version or the Super Nintendo version, there's a version on Steam. Go ahead and get that as well. It's an excellent game, no matter where you're playing it.
Yeah, people harp on the Steam version a lot, and I get it, but like the reasons that they harp on are really just kind of like nitpicky, nerdy, purist kind of like just play the game, man. Like it's on Steam, it's there, it's really good. Don't focus on what it doesn't do. Focus on what it does.
From my original understanding, it was that the original, when they first released it, because this is the thing, is Square Enix kind of like dropped this thing without telling anybody about it. So they were just like, hey, Chrono Trigger, ta-da. And they based it off of the mobile version. And apparently there was, when it originally released, there was some like legit hiccups and stuff with the thing, but Square Enix actually patched it a few times, and now it's supposed to be perfectly fine. You can absolutely run it, and it'll be a pleasant enough experience as playing it on the Super Nintendo or the
all right. My apologies to the nitpicky nerds then.
So with that, I guess the question is, if it wasn't already obvious from what we've talked about it so far, and I want to start with you on this, Paul. What do you think of Chrono Trigger as far as where it stands amongst its contemporaries, in the 16-bit JRPG sort of class? And then overall, what are your thoughts of it?
Well, it's not my favorite 16-bit RPG, even though it should be based on like what we've talked about and so on. But the fact of the matter is, it's the best RPG of that era.
Yeah.
I like, objectively speaking, you can make arguments like Final Fantasy VI certainly has a lot more content.
Yeah.
Right? Final Fantasy IV was the first one. And even, if you like dungeon crawlers, like even if you're going to like Shining in the Darkness on the Genesis, like there's something for everyone. Everyone's got their favorites, right? So it's kind of hard to say like this is the best, but with that said, Chrono Trigger's the best. Like it is such a, all those, it floors me how little I appreciated it back then. When I look at it now and I see exactly what it accomplished, like to think that once upon a time I was like, yeah, time travel, whatever, like I didn't really fully appreciate just how seamlessly and how they were able to pull that off without all the usual traps that time travel falls into. They just made it really simple, and they made it really fun. The characters just like, let's go get the bad guy. It's fun, man. Like, and it's tight. It's like 20 to 25 hours. Like all the chaff is just removed. It's dripping with personality. And frankly, there just hasn't been anything quite like it since. Yeah. Like you can look at other RPGs that are tight experiences. I look at Vagrant Story as one of those. We'll talk about that at a later date. I'm sure Kelly can't wait to talk about how much she loves Vagrant Story.
I'm going to be sick that weekend.
But say what you will about Vagrant Story, it's a tight experience, right? But at the same time, it's much darker than Chrono Trigger. It's not as, like Chrono Trigger just hits this sweet spot that has been imitated but never duplicated, and I often wonder if it ever will be. I just don't think it will.
Yeah I mean, it's possible. Kelly, I'm gonna give you the floor now to, same question as Paul. Where does Chrono Trigger rank for you amongst its contemporaries, and then just overall, what do you think of the game as far as its place in history and what it's done?
When I talk about like my favorite games, I usually bounce back and forth between 3 games, and Chrono Trigger is one of them. So to me, to this day, it really holds up. I honestly believe that you could take this game, give it to a teenager who has no history with the game, doesn't know anything about it, and say, yeah, this is a cool new retro RPG in the retro style, came out last week, give it a go. And I think they would still go, wow, this is a really cool game.
I agree.
Yep.
It holds up over time. It's a timeless game. The battle system still is fun, quick, enjoyable. Characters hold up. Story holds up. It just holds up to this day. And I truly believe it's a timeless game that people will treasure forever.
Yeah.
That look, like that, you can, if I gave somebody Final Fantasy VI and I said this was a new retro game, they would see right through me. Not so with Chrono Trigger. Like, the sprites are so evocative, so well animated. It was like the future in, for sprite-based games. But, sprite-based games died right after that, only to be resurrected many years later. But that was kind of the pinnacle. And like Kelly said, I think you could look at that game today and you could be fooled into thinking that it is a modern retro,
Indie
chip
RPG.
art kind of game.
Yeah, I agree with everything you guys have said. It's, it's one of those games that gets so much hype, so much unending praise from pretty much anyone you would ever ask. And when you play it, it delivers. Now, it could deliver to different amounts depending on who you are, but I have yet to meet someone who's played this game, given it a chance, played it all the way through, and has not come out the other end being like, that was good. I enjoyed that. I do not regret the time that I spent with this game. And when you think of the variety of people that are involved in this hobby now, the variety of people who have like different preferences, different tastes, the vast, the gamut of video game genres, for a game like this to get almost universal acclaim to this day, I think really says something about the quality of the content that's in the game itself. It's a game that is breezy and tight, but is very dense and will give you content if you want it. If you want to become involved in the lore, the stories, if you do the side quests, if you do all that stuff, you'll get an experience out of it. You'll get a full story out of it. And, to think that when you look at everybody who's involved, a murderer's row of, from the art to the direction to the music to the writing, that it all sort of came together so seamlessly that it doesn't actually feel like this many people worked on this game, even though it's a relatively small team. It just, I don't know, it stands head and shoulders, I think, above most of the other games of its time. And even today, it could probably go toe-to-toe with a lot of the, newer RPG experiences that people are getting.
I agree. Yeah, it's really a testament to it's a testament to don't make your game 60 hours, make your 20 hours better.
Yeah. Make your 20 hours feel like 60.
Yeah, like it's so good at what it does. It really is. I wish I had appreciated it more back then.
Yeah, I mean, I wish I could have come in here just being like, this is bad. Everybody's wrong. But I can't. I can't. This is gonna be another drop in the Chrono Trigger praise bucket. That is seemingly endless, but it deserves it. It really does. It's one of those that is really deserves the praise, and its influence is felt, I think, in the appropriate way. It's not over exaggerated. It's not underestimated. I think it sort of lands right where it needs to.
I think so too.
All right, and that's gonna close the book on Chrono Trigger for us today. Unfortunately, we didn't get to any of the sequels, but if you know us, you'll know that we'll eventually talk about them and give them their own 2.5 hour episodes each, probably. But this was a great time. Kelly, again, thank you for coming on. Look forward to doing a lot more of these with you, if you can imagine that.
Absolutely.
And Paul, as always, thank you for steering me in the right direction and contradicting all of my points. Even though I am correct, I want to say conservatively 97.5% of the time.
That's a very generous estimate.
But thank you guys so much, as always, for listening, for reviewing, for interacting. You know where to find us. Instagram, Region Free Gamers Podcast. Twitter, Region Free Gamer. Our Patreon, patreon.com/Region Free Gamers. If you want to sign up for that Patreon for as little as $1, you get Discord access. You can chat with us. You can do all that stuff. If you give us a little more, you get to see these live streams of us actually recording. You get to hear all the crazy stuff that Paul yells at me that he ends up editing out. And you can vote on episode topics. So I think it's value well added. And if you can't do that, at least leave us a review. iTunes, Stitcher, Podbean, anywhere you can leave a review. Just tell people about us, because we really appreciate it, guys. But that's going to do it for me. So till next time, guys, have a good time. Peace.